It says we're now live on Facebook.
Yeah.
Let me check our Facebook page. Not showing up yet.
All right, Andrew's here.
Yes, we're on.
All right. I think Andrew's connecting to his audio, and we are live on Facebook. Sorry, everyone. We thought we were live on Facebook, and we weren't live. So, welcome to Mystical Mondays with Seaside Shadows. You have all three of your ghost hosts here this evening, me, Courtney, Laura, and Andrew. And I'm really thrilled about that because we got to all three be a part of segments and hosts for this past week that we're looking forward to going over with you. Just a reminder how Mystical Mondays works. This is our one segment of the week where we get to answer your questions actually live instead of waiting till later and seeing them when we can, because when we're broadcasting the other segments, we don't get to answer in real time. So on Mondays, you can send us your questions and we can answer close to real time as possible. And we encourage you on Mystical Mondays to ask us questions for those segments you didn't get to chat with us about before: Witchy Wednesdays, Cemetery Saturdays, and Spooky Story Sundays. And you can also ask us any questions about the paranormal in general, ghost hunting, ghost tours, haunted history. You can ask us, how we're feeling with the full moon eclipse, anything like that. And we are happy to be here to answer those. But I'm going to get the ball rolling, and we're going to go kind of chronologically here and talk about Witchy Wednesdays. And we kind of started the week on a really magical note, which I think is very fitting because we had the full moon eclipse this week and we have a lot going on astrology wise, and there's been a lot of spirit activity lately. I even just took a nap, which I haven't done in forever because all the activity's been so much, it's very draining. So one of the great things that people have always done throughout the ages to sort of understand what's going on around them that would be not understandable is look to magic in their culture. And one of those sources of magic that creates mischief is fairies. So, Laura, I'll open it up to you to recap what you liked most about Witchy Wednesday. And did you think that the fairies are kind of coinciding well with all of the energy right now?
I definitely think so, because taking a look at what people talk about in terms of fairies and hidden folk, they're always kind of the scapegoat for something mischievous, whether it be moving something without your permission, or children say, oh well, it wasn't me, it was the fairy, and things like that. But I think they're kind of like the concept of nargles in Harry Potter, what Luna Lovegood talks about. I think they're very similar. They always are the scapegoat for everything. They're doing something. But I love talking about them just because I feel like a lot of people in their head will picture a sweet fairy. And a lot of times that's not often the case. I talked about the Trows in Orkney, and the Trows are not nice at all, and you never want to encounter one. And then in Iceland, they talk about the hidden folk, the elves, and they're sometimes nice, but other times they're not nice. Most of the time, they're just known for causing mischief. So I think it was interesting reading about also the cultural aspect of it and how these creatures are part of their culture. And it also depends on where you live, depends on how you interpret them. Do they live in burial mounds on Orkney? Do they live in boulders in Iceland? Do they have fairy rings in England? I think it's really interesting seeing the different cultural context of them.
Yeah, I keep thinking while you're talking, probably because I've been rewatching it, but in True Blood, they have the fairies, right? And spoiler alert from like 10 years ago, Sookie Stackhouse is a fairy, but they show them as like these really beautiful like creatures and like wood nymphs that are just wandering around these streams, and then like you find out they're these awful, ugly creatures, when that falls away. And, that really kind of shows what you were saying is like there's this depiction that they're sweet and beautiful and we want them around. And then there's this
Mhm.
other side to them. And I always like was attracted to leprechauns, which are kind of one of the forms, some would say, of fairies, or some would call them nemesis of each other. But it's funny, like the leprechauns I always saw as like the underdogs, like that they were always working really hard and got a bad rap, but they were like not at least putting on facades like the fairies. What do you think makes cultures have such different names for them, but yet brings them similar?
I think that the interesting thing is they all seem to be under the same umbrella of European folklore. And I think because of the trade and because of the travel, they do swap stories and say, well, elves, we have those, but we call them trows. And I think that they are like the trows are actually probably Scandinavian and Scottish blended together, which is again very interesting. I think that it kind of depends on a lot of things. I think Orkney is a very hardy culture. There's no trees. It's very rocky. It's very rigid. So I think trows are going to naturally be this kind of sallow, earthy fairy. And I think in England, they're seen as kind of more sprightly, and they're a bit more, pretty. And England, of course, has the green rolling hills and everything. And I think that's another reason why they talk about the fairy rings. And in England, that's kind of the place where they talk about the good fairies, which are the brownies, which are the ones that live in your household and help you. So it's interesting that some of them think of them very negatively, and some of them think of them as a kind of a positive thing.
And I think what people don't realize is people very much do believe in them and seek them out. And I was planning our Seaside Shadows trip to Ireland, and one of the spots I was trying to get on the itinerary was an actual pub where they have tiny clothes and like a tiny walking stick that a supposed alleged archaeologist found one time by these little standing stones where the leprechauns lived under, and it's hanging up in this pub like it's a museum, and everyone goes to see the authentic, little people clothes, and people are still looking for them.
They have
And
the fairy flag in Scotland.
yes, and like they have them hanging there, in these. I saw one in the McDonald Museum in Skye, and I will never forget, like, honest to God, Marty and I got married in Ireland, and we went horseback riding there during the week that we were there. And we were up in Killarney, and it was really mountainous, and it was a quiet time of year. So it was just the two of us and our instructor. And there was this man that looked straight out of some documentary about Ireland, this old man, with like the little knitted cap. And he even had his walking stick, and he was walking along the wood line as we were heading up toward the trail. And our instructor, said hello to him because we were passing by, and asked what he was doing. And he said, with utmost seriousness, I'm still looking for my pot of gold. I will find them, and we laughed really hard. And I remembered, thinking how funny that was, but how immersed it still is in their culture, all these years later. And perhaps that belief and that immersion brings some truth to it, that there is something, again, more than just humans and human spirits and some other elements, at B, whether it's just cultural or, real, that are influencing us. I was really glad you did that, because it's such a big part of life in general. And, I still wonder in the back of my mind, they could be out there. Who am I to say no to them? And Beltane, I left out flowers for the fairies so that they only brought me good luck and didn't get mad at me. So, you've always got to be sure, better safe than sorry. And
well, that's what I kind of found. What was interesting is that even people, who are scientific, people who are lawyers, politicians, serious people, would still come out and say, you can't destroy this. It's a fairy tree. You can't destroy this boulder. It's fairy housing. And to me, not only is it part of their culture, it's an integral part of their culture that they still think of to this day. I describe it as, we touch iron in New England for good luck, or we put a horseshoe up over our door, we knock on wood. That is something we don't even think twice about. That's just something that we do. And that is how I would describe the fairies in a lot of these cultures. It's
yeah,
just like, even if you don't totally believe in them, it's best not to upset them.
I actually, in Scotland, they have on the Isle of Skye Fairy Pools and Fairy Glen, which are two hiking spots, and they are very naturally beautiful. And the water is all these crazy colors. I actually have like on my desk that we took from the fairy pools, and it's got all these intricate little holes in it, but I call it like my good luck fairy stone, right? But what they're having an issue with is, and Laura, you may have heard about this, especially at the Fairy Glens, is that a lot of tourists who have their own ideas about what fairy culture means are making their own sort of stone circles and fairy houses and putting these things on the fairy glens, in the middle of them, thinking that makes it look more magical, like a home for fairies. And we stayed at a B&B. You know, I love getting kind of the flavor of local culture when I go places. And the woman that owned the B&B, she was lovely, but she was validly concerned and said it was a concern on Skye that they would be upsetting the real fairies by projecting these human things onto their grounds, and that it would affect the literal energy of the glens, and that was a concern on Skye. So it's important that we realize that, as exciting as we may find it, that it is still a serious part, especially in these Celtic regions, and to enjoy it but not influence it in that way. And I don't necessarily disagree with her. Could we be impacting the energy of it, whether it's literally the archaeological and geological formations there, or also the spiritual connotations of, you know, that? And there's some articles online that came out in the recent year or two about you know, meetings that they're having to try and stop tourists from influencing the fairy magic.
Well, it reminds me of something that happened very recently. I don't know if you've been to Clavacarns in Scotland near Inverness.
Yes.
So I went there. It was a beautiful, highly recommended if anyone goes to Scotland. It's amazing, magical place. But again, with the tourist, with the changing things around, people keep trying to dismantle and take some of the integral rocks that are part of that cairn. And a man supposedly took a rock, and he said ever since he took it, his life has gone to hell. And he said horrible things have been happening to him and his family. People have died. So he was just horrified by this stone. And he actually sent it. I think he was from Europe somewhere, and he sent it back through the mail to Scotland and said, "I'm so sorry. Please put this back where you found it."
Yeah. I mean, I think that shows like the magic and truth of it. And one of the things, if that doesn't inspire you, the bad juju, to stay away from Clavacarns in that way, visit it by all means. But they actually used a lot of those stones and imposed the image of them for the Outlander stones. So, you know, be good to them for that reason, if nothing else. But I think you know, just this misunderstanding of, you know, thinking that everything's made up, and when we go somewhere, we're entitled to have a piece of it or to leave our part on it, when really we should respect it as is. But I think that they could all be hints that there are other magics out there that we don't understand, and we should let them be and appreciate it. So I think definitely, if you visit Ireland or Scotland, be aware that it's very real to a lot of people there, and don't scoff at that. I think, you know, there's something to it. Obviously, that bad juju shows that there is something to it. And I am hoping that, you know, after all the travel regulations are lifted, that, you know, Seaside Shadows has always had the goal, and we've been announcing the trips for Scotland and Ireland. If there's any place that's filled with magic and supernatural and superstition, it's those two places. So we really want to take you there, and we're really hoping travel restrictions will be lifted soon. But the fairies are just the start of, the magic in those countries, and how far it goes, and why we believe so much in good luck from these cultures and things like that. And speaking of cultures and going into a different direction a little bit, or experiencing and celebrating a lot of cultures this week at Seaside Shadows, going from a lot of Western European regions, from the Norse and the Irish and the Scottish, and the English, right on over to African American culture, especially here in early America, and going into the 19th century. We felt it was, fitting and definitely time due for some African American history for our Cemetery Saturday and Spooky Story Sunday. So for Cemetery Saturday, we found this amazing person, James W.C. Pennington, who spent much of his life in Hartford, an escaped slave turned abolitionist and minister and Yale graduate, and all these other titles that we can give to him, and really big community influencer, someone who he conducted the wedding of Frederick Douglass. His impact on the community was, not quantifiable because it was so enormous. And one of the things we noticed when we were looking for information on James W.C. Pennington is that we were not able to find a burial site for him. We did find that he passed in Florida, but since his impact on Connecticut was so large, we endeavored to find a place that commemorated him, a statue, a marker, any memorial like that quantifies a Cemetery Saturday. And we couldn't find one. Crazy, right? If I did half those things, I better have a marker somewhere, that's it. It was crazy. But then I thought, maybe not so crazy. Maybe this is what happens to Black history, and it just sort of gets talked over. So of course, we were lucky to find out that the church that Mr. Pennington was the minister of and helped found, the first African American church in Hartford, does still stand and exist today. And so we went there for that segment, and that's why we're at that setting. And we were pleased to find that his name is on a small plaque on this very large church, where he is listed as outstanding minister from the past. So a little something for that. We were excited to see his name on the building, after all that. But it was a really kind of epic, I would say, story to tell. We couldn't tell all of it. We went over a half hour. A severe thunderstorm opened up over us. Everything that could happen happened in that half hour. There were fireworks, everything. So we had that all, but we shared this story, and you could definitely feel the energy coming from the church, and you could feel that he knew that we were there. But I felt, his influence was in a sense of gratitude for his story being told. And I would love to, get more feedback. We tried to share it in local communities as much as we could on how other people felt. But in my opinion, he was one of the most influential Black leaders, especially in the 19th century, kicking off a lot of these anti-slavery, abolitionist, right to vote movements, where he was at the helm as a president for a lot of these movements. So I'll open it up to Andrew to talk about why he felt James Pennington was so influential. He did a lot of reading and research for it too. We kind of co-hosted. When you get a really big figure, sometimes it's nice to share the load of telling the story. But Andrew, why don't you talk about how influential you felt James Pennington was and why he impacted you?
One of the biggest things for me immediately was the scope of what he had done. Like, this guy did so much for so many people, and this was the first time I had ever heard about him. immediately that was the most jarring thing about him. And the thing that made me want to dive into him even more was, okay, like, why was his history gotten rid of, basically? Like, and I think a lot of it does have to do with the fact that he was such a big, influential figure, such a huge civil rights activist, an abolitionist. I mean, he fought against not just slavery, but even when people were fighting against slavery, he was fighting for better rights and better treatment of just humanity, of their dignity. And it was inspiring. Um, and I think one of the most telling things was the fact that one of his biggest antagonists and opponents had a plaque for a very long time in Hartford. And he just had a very little plaque on his own church. Like,
Yeah.
the celebrated figure was his opponent, not him. And I
Yeah.
think that's very telling as well.
And for the audience, what opponent are you speaking of?
I'm currently blanking on his name.
When it comes to you can tell us.
Yes, I will.
I think the other thing, and maybe I'm the one that found this incredibly upsetting as well as others, but the fact that he escapes, slavery in Maryland. He makes this very long journey through the Underground Railroad, makes it to the North not being a place of freedom for a lot of Black folks anyway, just a better chance. Slavery is still legal in the places that he travels to, including Connecticut. But he makes it, out of his slavery. He gets, commissioned by this church in Hartford to, be their minister after he lets himself go to Yale because no one really acknowledges him. But the upsetting part is he does this for years, and the vengeance that this slave owner had in Maryland, that he threatened and followed through on coming back up north to get his property back, and that he was going to take him and that he would have the right to do so, and that Mr. Pennington had to literally have a white friend buy him to be allowed to stay up north, was one of the most upsetting things I think I read. And I can't imagine what someone would feel like having to ask a friend to buy them as a person to save them. And the other horrifying part is how angry that man must have been to do that, and how truly he saw him as property. I think that was, one of the most upsetting parts for me in the story, to be honest, is that mentality, and how that must have felt is unimaginable. But that kind of, we mentioned that on Cemetery Saturday, but I want everyone to know that I found that an incredibly impactful time, and definitely telling of, this wasn't just an easy journey up to freedom. And Andrew's frozen, even though he looks like he's listening. Oh, he came back a little bit.
I think that's what's so frustrating about the Fugitive Slave Act that they passed, that they could come and get the slaves that had escaped to the North. It's that there are people that were willing to rat them out in the North. People think that everyone in the North was completely anti-slavery, but that's not the case. There were people trying to make a buck, and they would betray, their neighbor or someone that they had heard of that's hanging out at a tavern. And these people would say, oh, I know I'm from the North, but I heard there's this escaped slave and you can find him here. There were people who would do that. But then there were people like his friend who would step up and try to do what they can. So it was a very volatile time.
Yeah. And I am, you're going to see more from the Hooker family in Hartford in an upcoming segment, to be sure. But it was Reverend Hooker, who was his friend, a fellow minister, one of the founding families of Hartford, who was the man that, bought him so that he could be in a way free. But I just, yeah, like you said, that whole idea is upsetting. And I think there's a little bit more on that in a bonus segment that we filmed in Hartford that we haven't released yet, about some of Frederick Douglass's early encounters with Northerners, and how unfriendly and unreceptive many of them were to his message. And he was really most disappointed in Connecticut. So I think there's a lot of tones there of things that we don't talk about. Is, yeah, okay, the North had free people first, but there was definitely a lot of bad behavior and unacceptable behavior and treatment of people here for a long time. So yeah, I think it's upsetting. And I think me on a just human level cannot fathom the words, like saying the words, "Can you buy me?" so that this man doesn't come, take me back and torture me. Imagine saying that to someone, that's your equal, your peer, or perhaps you are even more well versed than they are. "Can you buy me?" Like, to have that discussion is a really heartbreaking thing to even fathom. But Mr. Pennington, does not let that stop him, and he goes on to continue to be a major influencer, which is what makes him so inspirational. But there's definitely sadness in these tales, and I think that's another thing that maybe we as people don't want to acknowledge, that darkness, but it's important we fully acknowledge it, so that we can move forward into the light of who we are. So hopefully, anyone who didn't get a chance to watch that segment, we ask that you do take some inspiration from Mr. Pennington. It's an exciting story. He's a fascinating individual. You can watch Andrew and I get soaking wet in a thunderstorm and run to the shelter of the side of the church. You can hear thunder in the background as the story builds, which is a really cool thing too. And I think really speaks volumes about the story we're talking about, and the life and the tumultuous levels that he had to endure. So hopefully you'll get a chance, and we encourage you to share that. A quick reminder on that and Spooky Story Sunday, you'll see links to Black Lives Matter donations in lieu of tips. We did that for Black History Weekend. It's never too late to donate. So when you watch those, if you're feeling inspired and moved and able to do so, please feel free to donate on the link that is provided on those videos. And then we'll move forward to Spooky Story Sunday, and then we'll talk all things paranormal. So we continued on Black History Weekend while keeping in theme with our segments on Spooky Story Sunday by featuring African American folklore, of which there is quite a bit. Some that really, a lot of it, as we were talking about with the fairies, that spans cultures and then gets changed and sort of adapted to the uniqueness of each culture as it gets passed down the generations, which is a really great thing to sort of do. And what was so funny to me when I was researching this weekend story was the black dog came up again. And I don't know how many times that black dog has come up in our spooky story segments. It came up with the black fox, obviously the black dog of West Peak, and all these Western European sort of, roots in the black dog and the influence of that, even when we talked about the Boarhog and, and as it related to a black dog story in England from the 1800s. So very kind of interesting. We're more connected than anybody thinks. All our cultures are so intertwined. It's actually kind of heartwarming to see how much we share in common in that way. The Boarhog for a husband, to me, was actually a pretty profound spooky story with a very clear message about people not showing their true colors, and about hidden secrets, and about not listening to those that are crying out the truth. And if that isn't a testament to for humanity, I don't know what is. We believe in what's shiny and glittery and gold. And she believed in this handsome, beautiful man. And then she finds out that it's a terrible monster that she married, who is transforming into this other figure. And she was told several times, but she didn't like that her brother was seen as dirty or not believable, and it was brushed under the rug. So I think there's the relatability of this servant boy being dismissed, and why African American culture really said, as it passed through the enslaved communities in the South, oh, this little witch boy, he's the hero of the story, but no one respects him either, but he knows what he's saying. And that kind of adapted it into that culture at the time. But I think it's important for all of us, don't judge a book by its cover, and listen to those who are saying the truth, even if it's not popular at the time, even if it's not what you want to hear. There is truth out there. So for me, the haunting of human nature was really big in that story, as much as the monster itself was. But I'll let you guys say, what did you guys think of the Boarhog?
I like that it spanned across a lot of themes. Usually a lot of stories will have one underlying theme. This, I think it covered everything. I think it covered race, gender, class. I think it just talked about all those things, because you have this woman who doesn't realize that this man is actually a horrible monster. And I think that's very much in terms of women's rights, talking about maybe domestic violence, talking about things of that nature. And I think that rings true today. I think talking about the servant boy and not believing him because they think he's, lesser than, because of his race, because of his class, and the fact that nobody's believing him just because of these things. If this was a woman, who was respected in the community, then they might have been like, oh, okay, maybe we'll listen. That's a boy. So that he's just kind of dismissed.
Yeah. And he has to work doubly hard to prove that it's true. He has to memorize the song. He has to set the tone, catch the reveal, he has to show them visually to be heard. They never end up listening to him at the end of the story. That does not happen. He has to show them with their own eyes what has gone on. But I think what bothers me is he shows the king what happens. The king kills the Boarhog and then tells his daughter what happened. She's like, okay, that makes sense. If this boy's been saying it for, forever now. So that's a little frustrating. He had to work so hard. And the heart that this character has, that he would want to work so hard for someone that doesn't even see him or acknowledge his presence. But yet he felt this loyalty to, and sense of protection and duty toward, was also a really profound part of that story. The little witch boy was an excellent protagonist, and he was the one with integrity the whole time. Not the Boarhog, not the beautiful
the community
woman.
As well.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you're protecting your community even if you don't know them. I think there are some stories that have come out in the media about strangers helping each other, and it's just because they're fellow human beings.
Mm-hmm. And I think of myself, though, would I be inclined, if I tried to help and I was dismissed? I might try one more time, but would I continually work to help if I was continually dismissed and treated poorly? Probably not. And I would say, I would be like, I have the right to stop helping you if you don't listen to me. That I don't have to do anything for you. So there still is this part in that character where he feels like he must, in a sense, feel like he has to. How many times do you try and be called, he was called names until to get under the bed, where he was forced to sleep. How many times are you going to do that? I wouldn't, right? So that shows that he felt still that he had to. And I think there's a relatability, especially in the enslaved cultures where this story really traveled, and it was the right thing to do, but they also had to in that story, and so there was still a force there, and that they couldn't do anything about, and that afflicted the witch boy as well. So that definitely, I think, allowed that. But I did like you said, that the amount of messages that came out of one page story, and the variations of it didn't change the integrity of the story. The variations that, he makes the Boarhog transform at the actual wedding with a tin whistle, or the Boarhog man actually can cure afflictions for the princess. I mean, those things are great, little additions and variations, but they don't change the heart of the story, which remained the same. And, some say it originated in the British Caribbean. I think the Boarhog version did. But obviously it has those earlier tones. And one of the weirdest parts, and I didn't talk about how weird this was yesterday, but it's weird that the story ends with the storyteller bragging about eating the testicle of the Boarhog and having food for a week. That's the end line of the original account. So
that storyteller is very macho.
But then it was about, in longer versions, about how the Boarhog went on to feed the community. So it's like the royalty just gave them the scraps of this monster, and they had to be grateful that they had this monster, to eat. It was a very bizarre end to the story, and I don't know why he bragged that that's what he took as his meal for a week, but here we are. So if you're like, Courtney, did you really say that he ate the testicle at the end of that story? I absolutely did, and that is how it is written. So there you are. Yeah, I was like, wow, should we change that, or no, we're gonna go with it? That's what he says. But that's the story of the Boarhog. So if you guys have any questions later about these characters and this folklore, feel free to send us questions. Hopefully you don't have any, because we did such a fabulous job explaining them the first time. That's always our goal, moving into these stories. I do want to briefly talk about the trajectory of how long online segments continue and when tours come back. So we're going to meet privately as a staff and discuss our best return date. But we do foresee that by, we're working on getting permissions for phase 2, which are going well, but we still have our own prep to do for you guys to experience the tour safely. So we're thinking that around July, you will see us, and we have some tickets going up in the next few days for the summer. You will see it. It's a more limited schedule. We've already discussed that we won't be doing the 5 days a week like we started off with, but you will still have opportunities to ghost tour with us in the summer. And it will give us time to get everything straight so that we have a full schedule come fall. But you'll be able to check out those summer tour schedules soon. And there will be no boat tour in July. That's just not feasible with the current restrictions. But we're looking to bring back boat tours in August and have those for the fall as well. So that's where we're currently at, and the details will be released. But I know there's a lot of talk in Connecticut about phase 2, and we are working on it, and we are excited to get back out and ghost walk with you, hopefully in about a month or so, maybe a little bit sooner, but very, very soon. And as for the virtual segments, we are going to continue an online presence, but you may not see 4 days a week as we try to balance with the tours that are going out as well. But we will still have our virtual segments in some capacity so that you can continue to enjoy free online content and local content. And we're going to do our best to bring as much as we can to you. Just remember, we are only 3 people, and we are endeavoring on other projects too, but we're going to do everything we can to stay connected with you. So for anyone having questions about the reopening, that's the long answer to it. But we're working on it. I talked to Ledgelight Health District today. I'm working on the self-certification, so we're making steps in the right direction. There was something else I had along those lines, and I'm trying to remember, but it will come back to me. Anyway, I think that's all you guys need to know, is that in July, you'll be able to walk with us again, but you will likely have to wear a mask, and you will be social distancing on the walk. If you come in this summer, we recommend a light and airy mask. We will continue to provide bug spray, and as much as we love being close to you, you will notice that while we don't have to wear masks as your tour guides to tell you stories, which would be a little bit hard in our mask, we do have to stand 12 feet apart from you. So that's just something to bear in mind, but we'll have mics, so you'll be absolutely fine. Do not worry about that. Outdoor recreation is actually one of the safest things to do during a pandemic, and one of the ways that you are least likely to transmit a disease. And that's what I was told by the health district today. And that makes me happy. That's what I was thinking. You know, we're outside, we've got fresh air, we're apart from each other. So that means ghost tours are coming back soon. I'm trying to think if there's any other questions, because I know I had gotten quite a few requests for tours this weekend. And we are still in phase 1. Sorry, Connecticut. So none this weekend. Any other questions that you guys saw online that I maybe missed, other than, do you have tours? Gotten a few of those.
No, I haven't seen any.
Okay.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. That's easy then. And I am still doing virtual readings on Zoom, so those are definitely bookable. And we will still be doing all of the virtual segments at least through the end of June. So you guys still have that to look forward to. And of course, if anything, God forbid, should happen again, we will do more virtual segments and less walking. But let's advocate for more walking and fresh air.
Oh, we do have, do you want to talk about our website?
The redoing of?
Yeah.
Yes. Our website is being redone. We don't know when. So I put out a post today on my social media looking for a graphic web designer. If you're like, hey, Courtney, you've never looked for one before, it's true. My sister is a graphic web designer. But I call her out publicly on being the worst texter on the face of the planet. And I've been texting her to fix our Seaside Shadows website and update it. Why? Because we want to update it, but also we have an online store that is created, but yet not linked to our website quite yet. So after I put up a post requesting a graphic designer, my sister got in touch with me. Isn't that great? I mean, this is her job. This is what she does. So I pulled the sister card, and we will have a redone website with our store linked to it, hopefully before we launch our tours again. But in the case we don't, any old website will have everything you need to buy tickets. And the new website will have the store, which will have things available for sale, such as lavender water, rosemary water, black salt, books. We're getting new apparel for the 2020 season. We're working on getting masks for you guys as well. If you don't bring your own, you can have a Seaside Shadows mask. Adder stones, Laura is working on gathering and assembling those for your protection for the Seaside Shadows store. So everything from books to magical things and apparel will be available in the store when it is launched. And you hopefully will see a new face to seasideshadows.com very soon. You can always just leave in the comments like, hey, Shelby, make that website. That's my sister. Hey, Shelby, just say it. and then I'll send her screenshots. All right. And I'm going to put the Seaside Shadows community on her. She's probably going to watch it. She's going to kill me, but she'll do it. She'll do it. I know. I'm not that scared of my sister, but just a smidge. She's my baby sister, but like, she's a sassy personality. So be careful. Just say, hey, Shelby. Don't say anything else. But we'll have a new website soon. And we've been talking about Salem for weeks. I'm still pumped about it. I don't know. We're just going to be completely honest here. I don't know why my license hasn't arrived in the mail. I can only assume that the town council folks and staff who work at the Salem City Hall have not been in the office to physically make licenses and mail them out, because it's a physical laminated license that has to be mailed out. So my assumption is that that's the case. So we're kind of waiting when Massachusetts has them go back in. That one will be a virtual one, and will still happen even if we're out running tours here. We'll still make sure we have a virtual Salem tour for you guys. I know Massachusetts has a different phased reopening that's a little bit more delayed with in-person tours than Connecticut is. So that one will be virtual. And again, like with everything, you guys will know when I know, or when I get my license in the mail. I check daily. I'm ready for it too. So that's another thing. So yes, new website coming. Still waiting on Salem license. No ghost boat in July, but hopefully a ghost boat in August. And walking tours should be resuming in July. So a lot of exciting things and changes coming here at Seaside Shadows. Some things back to the new normal-ish, and other things, just an exciting expansion. We are still working on new tours, but again, our meetings and ability to access places for those new tours has been slightly delayed, for obvious reasons. We were dealing with a pandemic this year, right, guys? So thank you for riding that roller coaster with us, and I know that we'll do everything to keep you safe and spooky at the same time. And we're excited for all the good things that are coming, and just make sure you stay tuned for our announcements. I'm trying to think, is there anything else I'm forgetting, you guys?
Nothing comes to mind immediately.
Okay, good. I'm like having one of those weeks where right after I go to like something to talk to someone, I think of all the things I forgot right after I leave, you know? So I'm glad to have you guys back me up. I'm just like, oh yeah, cool. Forgot half the things I wanted to say. So I think that covers all of it. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. If you're tuning in later, send us questions and we will answer as soon as we see them. Even if you don't ask us live, you can still think of it as a Q&A. And then we will see you this week for a whole new round of virtual segments. Stay spooky. And remember, if you can send tips, there is a link here, and we are ever so grateful for your support during this time. And another way to send tips, say you're like, wow, I'm watching 4 segments a week, and we hope you are, because that's what we're doing. But you don't want to send a little tip here or there. On our Patreon, there's an actual $5 tier where you just pay $5 a month, and it's a tip for the month for everything, for all 20 segments or so. So think of it that way. And then if you want to do a little bit more each month, we still have that up there that allows everything from monthly individualized readings sent to you to special after tour access for investigations. So still consider subscribing to our patreon.com/Seaside Shadows as a way to tip or continue to participate in Seaside Shadows activities. But I hope you guys are hanging in there. We have crazy astrology coming up. So if you've been feeling tired, temperamental, stressed, my anxiety that's usually at like a solid 6 because I'm an anxious person, has been at a full 10 all week. So you're not alone if that's happening to you, if you're feeling fatigued. Eclipse season is here. There's 4 eclipses in a row. 7 planets are retrograde this month, so be good to yourself. Hang in there, and you'll get through it, and hopefully our segments will help you pass the time. But stay spooky, and thanks again, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.